Let's go live. So today we start with backlog reviews again. Let me first fix the layout. No offense, awesome, but I really want to use the rest of the screen for the backlog, not but just one avatar showing up. All right, so this is basically the sorted backlog by, I get my mouse in the right position, by age. But I think the first we probably have to skip because I think we need to have Fowler and other people in the room. Native loader, same thing. This one, the unsafe user work item would be probably great to have Steven on that one. I suppose it goes from thread pool.
So it looks like there's a regular queue user work item method that takes it, and we just want to expose an unsafe version.
I thought we talked about this, didn't we?
Yeah. Who gave the thumbs up? Was it Steve?
Yeah, that we did too.
Ben. Good enough. Ship it.
Well, that Ben likes it. It's pretty obvious. It's like whatever makes his code faster, he'll take. But we did add an unsafe one, no? Like I'm pretty sure we talked about unsafe user work.
It's internal right now.
No, we proved on API, I thought.
We did, but the particular overload that's being talked about now is internal, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. So, but then my point still stands, right? There's a general pattern that we already kind of approved, which is an unsafe queue user work item that doesn't flow execution context, right?
Right.
So in that case, it will be the same.
As long as Steve has given his assent somewhere in here.
Yeah.
I don't think he did. Nope, he did not.
He kind of did in that comment that is linked to.
Oh, you mean like here?
Yeah. I believe that was his comment saying we should change the signature. So this is for the regular not unsafe version, but I assume it still holds.
Okay, so this is effectively the unsafe corresponding API to that, right? So then I don't see a reason why I wouldn't approve it.
Okay.
Anybody else?
It just doesn't capture the context, correct? That's the
yeah, like that. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. No, not that one. That one. I should really type this on my other screen because I really can't type it. I'm having turned my head 90 degrees. I don't know why, but it doesn't work.
In fact, he even wrote a code comment on that method saying we should make this public. I'm just trolling through the source right now.
Just I wish we didn't call these methods unsafe. Too late.
Yeah.
Well, did they already ship? I don't think any of them have shipped yet. Huh?
Well, we already used this naming.
Yeah. Oh, okay, that's fair. Yeah.
To mean don't capture the context. What a bad decision. We should collect those.
Cass comes back to haunt us. Cass and everything else.
Okay.
We should write the book of bad decisions.
Well, that was honestly one of the biggest value adds of the annotated .NET, not .NET Standard Library, the .NET, I think it was called the .NET Standard Library, was it not? You know what I mean? Like the annotated reference that basically had...
annotated .NET reference.
Yeah, like that, because all the comments were effectively, here's all the things you wish you would have done differently. And that was actually honestly because nobody likes which type is which member, but the comments were really the thing that made it cool.
The .NET Framework Standard Library Annotated Reference?
Yeah, that one.
Really? That's what the book was called?
By Brad Abrams.
Wow, so that's a net standard library.
Well, but that was also pretty big. Like your definition of small wouldn't be satisfied by that either.
They are pretty much the same,
That is true, actually. Yeah.
except one was in several DLLs and the new one is in one.
All right. So the native library loader. Let's just skip that one as well.
Go there.
I thought we reviewed and approved that one in its own meeting.
Sorry, which one?
The native library loader.
Did we?
I thought we reviewed it and approved it, and then there was the remaining work item to also review the method that lets you.
What was the last comment?
Right. Yeah.
No, like just like well. I'm looking for my comment because that was the last we reviewed, I think.
Right. And then that's the one we said we needed a separate review meeting for, was the callback. It just never got the API approved, create a new issue for tracking the other bit.
Yeah, let me just remind myself what we actually did approve. So we did load library within PDR. For fast probing, we said try load library, free library. Yes, okay.
It looks like the API didn't actually accept the assembly in the call to load library.
No, I think it did. There was an overload that did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so one takes a full path and one takes library name. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So the only thing missing then is the callback for what? Register DLL import resolver? And that would be, I suppose, on that type too, right? Anything else would be crazy.
Right.
Oh, and the type you said would be Marshall. I see. Okay. Yeah, I guess that's fine.
So one thing about the callback func, it has a fixed signature, meaning we cannot add more to it.
Yeah.
Are we okay with it?
I'm not sure what you mean by that. How would you not have a fixed one?
Like a event arts.
Yeah.
Maybe
Oh,
we'll
I
add
see.
new overloads to load library in the future, and we can't represent them in this callback.
Well, I mean, the simplest thing is you just add an overload that takes a func with more arguments, right?
Yeah, but how do you get invoked? Like if you register.
Well, we invoke both, right? We just invoke.
But I think part of it is also, I think we wanted to have another meeting for the register DLL method that was with the group that did the original review. And so my comment was basically, since we've already approved 90% of this, unless there's something blocking it, we should say the approved APIs are API approved, and we should create a new issue for the remaining register callback.
Right, we could do that, but at the same point, at this point, it's also just noise, right? Like, if the only thing missing is just get these people in the room and talk it out, I mean, let's just do that.
So if we ever add a new overload, we would have to have another field because it's a different func.
Yeah, I'm not
And you
saying
would
it's
have to
awesome.
switch, like
All I'm
if this
saying
func
is
is
that it's
registered, then
possible.
call this callback, otherwise call this other callback. It's just gonna be so messy. And I can imagine how we would want to add more fields. So
Well, they're effectively the inverse of these methods, right? So, maybe, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's if we evolve these methods, it's easy. You change which one you're calling. And then as we need to evolve the callback, now you have to understand what happens if they call that one, but this callback was registered, and then, or if they call this new one and the other callback was registered.
Yeah, I mean,
Making it event args.
in
solves
general,
the
I agree with
forward
you. Like once you have a func that takes more than two, it does become a grabback, right? In which case, you really want to have what would be n, right? So, yeah, I guess that's fair. All right, so then let's just say we book these people in a room, and then we get, which one is this? This is 32015. Native, what is it called? Native load library. Just a callback. All right.
So when's the last time you actually saw the kind of spec that you have Appendix C? When you wrote the book? Before that?
Now when we transition PMs to
All right. So let's close this one then.
our community.
What do you have? Steven's still on the call.
Did we not approve this like a few weeks ago?
Thought we marked it as needs more work.
Right.
Well, Steve said this one.
Yeah, I remember having the discussion. I might have not marked it though. Yeah, I think Steven should be here, otherwise it's a bit hard. Yeah. Alright, let's move on to the next one then. Fortunately, Asim just dropped off the call, which would have been useful.
So I do have a little bit of context on this. He makes it pretty clear there. There are scenarios, especially in the UTF-8 JSON reader parser, where he needs to take the incoming read-only sequence and get the span corresponding to it. And one of the things that he's seen as a bottleneck is that he has to go through the memory property getter and then the span property getter hanging off of memory. The read-only sequence itself knows how to create a read-only memory of T from its internal backing fields. It should also know how to create a span of T from those same internal backing fields. And that could potentially have better performance than bouncing through memory of T first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's especially important if read-only memory sequence can just wrap an array, a single array, and that would be significantly faster.
Yeah.
When it's a chain, it probably won't be that much faster, or at all faster.
To be honest, like given the changes that we made in memory of T recently, we should also retest just using straight up memory of T as a backing field in these objects and see if that actually gives us even better performance than we have today.
If we do what?
So right now, the way that these work under the covers is these have a backing object, but they don't know if the backing object is an array or a string or a read-only sequence segment or something along those lines. And then right now, this type uses a bunch of bit fields internally in order to try to figure out what object it actually has and then cast.
Mm-hmm.
And then once it casts, it can then wrap that inside of a read-only memory of T.
Mm-hmm.
Given the work that we did in read-only memory of T recently to make it better optimized, we should investigate removing a lot of the logic that's in read-only sequence and maybe relying on read-only memory of T under the covers.
But read-only sequence is smaller. Well, if you store a single array, it's smaller than memory, I think.
Probably.
Because it's basically two positions. Read-only memory
Yeah.
sequence is two positions, and position is an object in it.
And then, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but
I mean, maybe it would be an
worth
appropriate
looking
trade-off.
into.
Yeah. But, I mean, if that doesn't pan out, then this would be an appropriate API.
Well,
for
even
scenarios.
if the other one pans out, wouldn't it be like this is completely independent? You still don't want to first get memory.
Well, if your backing
Against
field was read-only memory of T, then it would be the same thing, right? You would still be calling .span in all cases.
You'd be saving a copy.
Yeah.
Copying the read-only memory.
Can we look
The
at the
general
layout
would
of
optimize
read-only
that, I hope.
sequence, Emo? Because I think it's like, I'm not even sure whether it's gonna work, because when the read-only memory sequence stores an array,
Read-only sequence of T.
yeah, because it just stores it. Yeah, I'm actually a bit confused how
So
it
which one did
stores
you
an
look at?
array.
It was
It's one that
Read-only
hasn't been
memory
indexed.
sequence.
sorry what?
Read-only memory sequence.
Read-only sequences.
Or read-only sequence, sorry.
Yeah. That's,
Yeah,
It's
it's unfortunately
apparently in
not
the
indexed.
Mm.
Is it Core FX or Core CLR?
Core CLR has some indexing issues right now, if I remember correctly.
This should be inside of its own.
But it's in read-only. It's in
It's
Core
like
CLR,
CLR.
right? Not in Core.
No, did it get moved to Core CLR?
I don't see it
I don't
here.
know where any of this stuff is.
You've misspelled read-only sequence.
I guess that's true.
There you go.
It helps to spell things right.
So it has, okay, it's 2 sequence positions.
So yeah, so object end, object end.
Well, that means I'm not even. Okay, so it can. How can it? Oh yeah, when it's an array, the first position is a start in an array and then end in an array. Yeah, memory wouldn't work. Memory is 3 fields.
Okay.
It would make it bigger.
But the question is,
Would it make it
the-
faster?
Probably could be hacked by like reinterpreting the fields, but I don't know.
is
You
does
can't
the
reinterpret the fields.
does the API make sense?
So
Yes, the API makes sense, in my opinion. I don't think we're gonna be able to optimize it such that you can get memory and then span and be fast. And it's super common that you do this. And you want to often get the first one really cheaply because it's the fast path.
Because I mean, I agree that probably what you want to do, whenever you're operating on something, you need to span. Since memory is just to transport the span, and so being able to go straight to that does have a save. If nothing else, it's to save the pattern of doing the extra dot. But then, does it feel like we should have first, which is implicitly first memory, and first span, or should we have first, which was a property, and we should have thought about the memory and span at that time, and then get first span as a method so that it doesn't look torn.
Well, this is doing quite a bit of work under the covers, so a method would be more appropriate.
If the argument is it's cheaper than reading the property and then dereferencing the property, then it's less work than a property.
Well, they would.
By definition.
It would. There is still a decent amount of work going on in the covers for both the memory and span cases because the very first thing you have to do is figure out what you have, and there's a bunch of branching in there.
Right, but
no, but I think his argument is if you want to. So if you just look at code, right, and you see somebody writing sequence dot get first span versus sequence dot first dot span, clearly one looks cheaper than the other.
Does it?
Yes. The property access or the access with properties is cheaper.
I would assume the fewer number of dots is cheaper, to be honest.
Well, depends on how expensive the get method is, right?
Then we should make it a property, otherwise it's gonna look like.
so you want first and first span?
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's a good discussion. Like maybe we screwed up by calling it first, but now that we've done it, I think we have to keep going, and it should be.
I mean, we
first span.
shipped it, right?
Do we have
Yeah.
other places where properties return spans?
Yes, memory.span.
I'm just making sure that that this isn't pushing a unique burden on the debugger that we haven't done yet of having properties return restaurants.
like regardless of whether it's a property or not, like we should somehow have guidance or tooling or something that convinces people not to call this within a loop because it's doing a bunch of busy work.
Add an analyzer to that analyzer project no one knows about.
Yep.
That totally helps the case.
Yeah, but that was also true of memory.span.
It's probably true about for 90% of properties.
So Asim and I did actually look at this a few weeks ago, and we have some experiments we can play with to try to make this a little cheaper as well.
Yeah, that's implementation. This is API.
Unfortunately, this property won't exist in the Uber version, or will it? In the portable version?
Email.
I don't know. Oh, but anyway.
Well, I mean, did this type go inbox and framework?
That's a good question.
Because if yes, then no.
I don't think it did. Yeah, good point.
And if no, then whatever.
Then we are good. All right.
Cool.
I have to say though, like, first span is also not great. Like, look at the code. You're right. Like it.
Well,
Basically, the difference becomes no one period. It's like, does that convey that it's much cheaper? I am not sure. But yeah, I don't know what else to do.
You have to know.
well, it will also help with discoverability if nothing else. Calling it first span.
See, we should use out parameters now for everything. Then you can overload them.
What?
Okay. Editing chapter 5. All methods return void.
H result. I mean, go back to your roots. Right?
Now, then I have to rewrite chapter 4 as well.
Just tell Jared that you're going to make overload resolution harder.
Well, I just learned that you guys suck because when you have an extension method with 25,000 APIs, it takes you like a second to resolve an overload. Like,
I mean, I learned that if you have a CS file that has more than 65,535 characters on one line, the debugger doesn't work. I don't know what he meant by that, but
oh, because they,
Is that the one
I think they
off-
coerce it into an int. Like they have one single int that stores
Yeah.
line and the other, and then they just offset it. So when you run out of characters, you're just
yeah, I don't know if it's the PDB was corrupt or the breakpoint wouldn't hit or what. But yeah,
I
like,
think you're out of.
I started with an 800,000 character long line, and it compiled, but I can't debug
Your
it.
tools should add new lines every so often.
I don't know what this is, but this does look a lot like Meth.5. So maybe we should have a chat about that.
Also, I think it's totally okay because I don't know who can debug 65,000 character lines of code. They're not very debuggable.
Have you seen JavaScript?
Yeah, minified
I think
JavaScript
it
is
was
fun.
supposed to be that we have like open quote and then like
So
Yeah, that's
yesterday I
good.
was watching a nice presentation. Somebody discovered that move instruction is Turing complete. So they wrote an obfuscator. It takes basically some machine code and converts all instructions to move. The resulting machine code is super slow, but you can do it.
All right, cousin Jeremy, thoughts on this one?
Much better.
So, does this mean the language will depend on this exception? Being like this exception type existing?
I believe so. I believe they emit code that throws that exception.
Why does it inherit from invalid operation?
Yeah, that was the other thing that I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, because that
Like-
means that you're in an incorrect state.
Okay, what can I look at here?
At least that's the default test.
Like argument out of range exception seems more appropriate, but still not correct.
Yeah.
Well, the problem of argument out of range implies is that the caller fucked it up, right? Which is not necessarily the right thing if it's on your end. Was it match failure? No. Exception? No. Well, that's unfortunate.
It looks like maybe they want to allow you not to have to write a default case.
Oh, I see what you're saying. That would make sense. No.
Does the word default match anything in the LBM notes?
I see. So you're saying if you don't have default, they automatically
Yeah, I
throw
think
the
it's that
exception?
comment there.
So which one?
If the compiler thinks there are cases you don't handle, it will warn. If you actually don't handle a case, we'll throw an exception. They're currently doing it in a null ref,
Okay,
but they want something else for the long run.
got it.
I think match failure is what they want for the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah, that reference seems
Yeah.
a little bit weird.
The thing about match failure exception is it sounds almost like a regex thing, but
Pattern matching.
yeah, I mean it. As a generic term, it works though. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if it since the exception has a special purpose, like their comment says, indicates a switch expression that is non-exhaustive, failed its match with an input. This really needs to be somewhere else and with some other name, not system match failure.
So
Right.
system runtime compiler service.
Well, or
Unhandled case exception.
or switch match failure, or unhandled
Unhandled case
unhandled
exception.
case exception sounds
Yeah.
great.
So I assume they cannot do it automatically for regular switch statements because of backwards compatibility. But I can imagine this exception being reused by people who write default case manually and just throw.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be anything about match. It should be about switch.
Right. And it also applies to like if blocks, because I think under the hood the pattern matches get translated.
Honestly, like, I mean, now that I'm thinking about this, in pretty much all my projects, I ended up declaring my own exception, which basically is basically have a default that throws, right? And I basically created I think I throw argument or internal error or something,
Yeah,
which is.
And I think in the framework we do things like unreached in a lot of cases, where we're just like, you should never have hit this case, so fail fast.
Or it's an argument out of range exception because it's so I don't know why invalid operation exception. The only comment they have in here is that he updated the proposal to base it on invalid operation exception, and 2 people gave it a thumbs up.
So unmatched value, I guess, is the input to the switch statement.
Yeah, so this would be like if you're writing a standard switch off of an enum and you handled all the cases and then your default is throw, I don't know what this means. Then this is what is the thing that you didn't know what it meant.
Yeah.
What does contract failure throw? Does anybody know?
I thought contract failure was a fail fast.
Is it?
I thought it was. Let's find out.
If you
I mean, there's no exception declared, so.
System diagnostics contracts, you mean?
So unhandled case exception seems more appropriate.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be an invalid operation exception, maybe an argument exception, or maybe just a new root exception type.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it came in argument exception because there's not a contract failure, right? It's an implementation problem.
Depends on the API.
Well, I mean, like if you, the typical cases you take arguments and you have a method body, right? And
so not
you didn't
supported
have
exception be more appropriate? I mean, because you have input that you don't know, you don't support it, like you don't know what to do with it.
I think not supported is also something where the expectation is the caller can avoid it, right?
A base class didn't provide something, or that .NET Core says I'm never going to write this.
Honestly, not implemented is probably the closest one.
Well, so why do they even want a separate exception type
As opposed to?
for example, throwing invalid operation exception?
Because they want to return the value.
Return what value?
The unhandled value.
Oh, then unmatched value.
Yeah, so you hit the default case and they want to return the value that was unhandled.
And they want to return it because what? Some human will be looking at it?
It gets captured in a debugger.
Well, partially, I think they want it in the standard format string.
Yeah, it gets captured in the debugger, they can print it as part of the string.
So exception has a dictionary. They could just put it in there.
It's just undiscoverable with the debugger.
That's what I was asking. Is human is gonna be reading it, or is just for us? If it's for us, then we don't care that it's not discoverable.
I mean, if you did just throw something like argument out of range, regardless of whether it's appropriate, that also has the ability to track the value already.
But
Is it really?
Yep, argument out of range allows you to set the value and the name of the parameter.
Cool.
Yes, the one with the longest overload.
it seems like they added that
Is
based
that
on
also
feedback.
the one that has
rather
it
than-
backwards, so you have to set the name and the value?
No, well, argument exception has the string is the display message and then the name, and all the derived types. The first string parameter is the which argument did you not like. So it's when you drop the argument exception, you need to reverse the order.
Okay.
Honestly, though, based on the discussion, I honestly think we should remove unmatched value. Because what happens if you pass in a ref struct, now you don't have a way to box it, so now you have like cases where the value isn't even present. So you basically have to look at the source code all the time.
Well, I mean,
I mean, you would get null in that case.
Right, but now the question is, did you get a null value or did you actually get? So you have to look at the actual case in order to determine what's going on.
I think that's
Well, you
something
can
we-
toString the value and stuff. Like you can convert value to abstract to object.
Sure, but then I would
Somehow.
argue that from a human standpoint, what really matters is the message, right? Like,
maybe this is something we should get someone from LDM on so we can
yeah,
ask.
I think that this just collect the correct set of questions and then just see where we,
Yeah, to me the main question is, do we really need a new exception,
yeah.
or can we reuse one of those? Because it doesn't seem like something that will be handled correct.
And then if it does need a new exception, I don't think that the current proposal
Yeah.
is because, yeah, it sounds more like a regex thing. If we're saying that this should be the generic, I didn't know what to do in a default, then it should be unhandled case or
Mhm.
or something. But and if it's supposed to be a this is only for the compiler, then we need to move it out of system. People really like just typing throw, and IntelliSense gives them a like, yeah, this string kind of looks like what I meant. I'll throw that, even though the book says don't do that.
I mean, it's not the end of the world if people do that, though.
I mean, the question really is like, I mean, ignoring the value for a second, right? In order to, like, the only reason we would have a new exception type is if you expect anybody to basically catch it. Like in all other cases, like it doesn't matter. What really matters is you had an exception, you look at the message, and the message tells you like your code is a bug. Don't do
Yes,
that.
it does. I mean, we could do it as an accelerator on some other exception, but it does help with the. I just want to give you the value, and you give the standard message. Why do I have to, in every different assembly that I have, redefine the message of I'm throwing this exception because I didn't know what this value meant.
I wonder if it would make sense to have to actually have an API on compiler services, which just gets invoked by the compiler if there is no match, and then that API as an implementation detail can just do whatever.
Compiler doesn't like implementation details.
No, the implementation of the compiler would be called this method, and then the runtime chooses what to do.
Right, and that's where I think it would get shot down in LDM because of determinism. Then you could have mono versus
The language spec would say is an implementation detail, and once a language spec says is an implementation detail, that means no one should use this feature.
No, if only we had a compiler or a runtime feature that said this method never returns, then it's fully deterministic. If only.
Yeah, so now you need this stack behind something else.
Yeah,
And then there's
we've been
the-
asking for this for years.
And then there's the question of what does never returns mean? Does that mean it throws an exception, or does that mean that you can put a while loop and then never return?
Either, that's fine.
Except it won't be fine to the compiler. They're going to want an exception to be thrown, and they'll have to spec it to that.
Okay.
Yeah, because what that would mean is the compiler essentially would need to sprinkle fail fast after every one of those calls. But if somehow you do come back, just kill the process.
No, like that's when you have like actual enforcement that this method doesn't return.
That's how you do it. The compiler would just sprinkle and fail fast. We don't need a runtime change.
So what is the number here? 332. 33284.
I mean, I'll also say that if they're depending on a new exception type existing, then that means that that compiler feature can't be used on older targeting packs.
That's actually probably the strongest reason to not do that. Because that's basically artificially tying something that is purely a codegen feature to something that requires now an API. Yeah.
Because the compiler usually supports
Yeah.
all the way back to saying, I want to target .NET Framework 1.0.
Yeah,
Or
I
1.1,
like that actually.
since 1.0 didn't exist.
Yeah,
Didn't you write a
and,
blog post on this like a week or two ago?
Actually,
and that's also that would also be a case where, unlike attributes where the compiler can generate the type itself if it's missing, they can't do it for exceptions because of it's actually used at runtime for cases.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
it
fair.
would break your catch.
Why is the serialization API marked as security critical?
because if you mess that up, you can leak state. For example, like found not found exception. When you run in partial trust, we don't give you a pass.
Yeah, but this is core.
Well, but that's just the
Then
way
security critical
the
means nothing.
APIs were. And we moved
Yeah.
them to core. We didn't mess with security transparency because of the enforcement
Well,
rules around them.
you say that.
Do you want to explicitly call out ref_struct for unmatched value?
I think that's what I said here because it can be used in all cases. But yeah, I can call it out explicitly.
Yeah, I think just like an IE ref_struct.
Yeah.
Many
Such as-
many types had their transparency attributes removed during a big bulk edit, and then things that got added later tended to still have them because
Yeah.
But
But what I meant by
is-
not messing is we did not go out of
if
the way
this
to remove
gets
them.
added to
Right?
full
We
framework,
were probably
what reason
inconsistent
would we
now
have?
because
Yeah,
we never cared. But like,
someone did a pass at one point and deleted a bunch of them.
okay.
And
So for new exception, is it not necessary then? It's just fine to have it, but it's not mandatory.
Right, it doesn't do anything in core.
Do we still run the security critical validation tool at all?
Not that I'm aware of.
yeah, I don't think so.
Then who cares? All right, let me just refresh the screen.
Because stack alloc would completely break everything if we depended
Steven
on
on the call?
transparency and verification.
He's unfortunately not,
Okay.
and we rejected yours because it's a bad idea. Because you weren't on the call to defend.
Yeah, I
it.
noticed.
No, we actually proved it. We just said we should probably make it a property, not a
I saw
method.
Set up for you, man.
All right, so okay, match failure. Okay, now we get to the simpler ones here. Well, yeah, API JS meetup was not an easy one. Let me just close that quickly because that's a different one. All right.
So for this one, I was actually hoping for Steven to be there because Steven and Jeremy have opposing views.
Oh, that's okay. Christoph agrees with me.
Okay. So we have the try get int, try get single, and get string value, get bool value APIs already. Should we add get specific overloads for the try ones?
Yes,
Now,
because the
to
framework design guidelines say every time you have a try, you need a non-try that simplifies the API.
It's also faster.
I don't think that's what we actually have.
Is it really
The
faster?
book says so.
But I'm saying we're not following that.
So
We
it's
have
faster.
plenty of try there, so we don't.
I read that section like a week ago. The book
Yeah.
said it, and I was surprised.
2 reasons it's faster. First, that you don't have the branch inside the caller to handle errors, and second, you can register the return value through the EAX register rather than having to stack spill to allocate room for the return value.
Yeah, but then it cannot be inlined, and there are many.
It can be inlined.
No, not when it throws.
No, you can delegate throw into a helper method.
We do it.
Well, we have a throw. Yeah. Whenever you can use a defer to a throw.
But do we do it in those
Yes.
already?
I
Well,
thought we
the try ones don't throw.
No. I mean, if we added those get methods.
We would use a throw for you.
So I don't think it's actually faster in practice because most of our implementations are actually the non-try version.
Yes.
Calls the
If you-
try version.
You would have to flip that dependency, yes. But you at least remove the branch from the caller.
So the question is, what should be the semantic of these APIs? For example, right now we throw invalid operation exception if there is a token type mismatch in the get string value.
I mean, the general question is like, what does the caller do, right? Like, if the expectation is the caller will immediately throw, then sure, I agree that it's faster. If the expectation is that most callers will just skip the value, then it's definitely not faster because you throw an exception, the caller handles it, eats it, and then moves to the next one.
Well, the
caller would never
non-try
call.
ones are if you have like a schema
Right.
that says, so if you've already read the token type, which is the assumption that every sample that this is done is ever said, so you already know that you are on a number, and if your schema says this will be a number between 0 and 100, you should totally expect that's an int, and if it's not an int 32, you're in an invalid state and it's time to throw it.
No, I get that. All I'm saying is it depends on what you want to do, right? Like, for example, let's say you want to write a tool that just checks the file, right? Well, you want to report as many errors as you can. You don't want to just give up on the first time you see an error.
Right. Well, then you would use the try, and you would add error, and you would
You would handle the
thing
else
you call
case.
move next.
Well, but for that you would need to know why the try is returning false.
But the try only returns false if the number doesn't fit. That was the contract that we went with. It's invalid operation exception if it's the wrong data type because you should have done.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You should have read token type already.
So it's literally only basically the out of range scenario.
Yeah, and that's what we agreed upon. That was the
I
part
see.
where Steve and I had the disagreement. Steve said it should return false for the wrong token type, and I said that you've already tested it using test reviewer.
And did you reach a consensus?
Well, you and I reached a consensus
Yes.
while waiting
And
here.
did you reach it with Steve?
No.
Steve said he didn't want to block the PR anymore.
Okay.
Steve,
So,
Steve does not.
so this issue anyway is already agreed, correct?
We already checked
No.
it in.
Well, no.
Okay. It's already implemented. It's even
Yes,
okay. Awesome.
Except
Great.
Steven said that I said let's defer the discussion to this issue.
Right. So again, my feeling on this is we expect people to read the token type property, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Which means that if they haven't read the token type property, then we are actually now in a completely undefined state for these methods because we don't believe anyone would ever read the token type property, see that it's a string, and then call try get int 32.
Right.
That is the definition of an invalid operation
Well,
exception.
and also I would say like we don't want to return false for it because when would you like, hey, I ignored the token property, I called try method. Oh, return false. I better look at the token property now and call the right method. I mean that is completely nonsensical.
No, you would just write like try get in 64, try single.
Yeah, and that makes sense if you know it's a number. Of like, oh, I want it as an int 32. Oh, it didn't fit. And int 64. Oh, maybe it was a floating point number. I don't know why you would call try get single because Tanner's the only one in the world who cares about float. But so, and he probably doesn't care about JSON. So,
HtmlEncoder.
and so to me, it's the like all the things within the number. Return false means I'm not this kind of number. But if it says if the token type is string, this question makes no sense. So that's an invalid operation exception.
Yeah, I mean, in general, like I have no problems with adding a get method. So in that sense, it seems fine with me.
So the only thing I would say, I mean, do we really think that performance is the reason to add those?
I didn't think of it for performance.
Oh, okay. What is the reason? That
Just
is
the
more
guideline that
convenient?
if you have a try API, you should have a get.
It says
Non-try.
do provide an
it's just-
exception throwing
it's
member
just
for
to
each member
follow the
using the
design
type
guideline.
construct.
I see.
Didn't we write that?
Yeah, but you see there are nuances in design guidelines.
This says do. It
So,
doesn't
for
say
example,
consider.
the nuance for this guideline is if you're writing an API for advanced scenarios and developers. I mean, the original idea behind it is like there are many people who kind of don't care. They just want very convenient method that returns decimal or double. They don't want to deal with out parameters and try and whatnot. They just call it.
See, the problem is you're not doubting the book.
Yeah.
That is heresy. You can't do that.
So-
the book says we should add these methods. Now we have to follow
Right.
through
So,
with that.
so this comes down to like if it seems reasonable that there would be a number of JSON schema using whatever that word means that understand that a value would be constrained. So, for example, in the serializer, if you've said you're storing this value in an int 32, the serializer, if we don't add the get here, the serializer is going to say, if not, try get int 32, throw the exception that we could have put in here and have a
Yeah,
standardized
so
exception.
second reason I would add non-try methods is if there are scenarios where I kind of, like if I encounter wrong data or too large data, I would basically do what this helper is doing,
Yeah.
and we want a helper,
Yeah.
which
Well, you basically want somebody that has the knowledge of the format to give you an error message that is better than I couldn't do it, right? It's like, well, I expected a dot here, but you had a dash here or whatever. And in order to do that, you would have to re-implement the parsing method, right? Versus in these cases, though, like there's not much more data besides the number is not in the range, right?
Yeah.
So still, like you have to construct the exception, you have to get the message, and blah blah blah, right? Like, so
So,
there's
and
some
then
value in doing that.
These
in
just
general.
give you the, I want the standardized exception, like, this either fits or I'm throwing, so why am I writing the boilerplate?
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is we already have get APIs for get string value and get boolean value based on the semantics that we've discussed. Those ones don't return; they don't have a trial equivalent. They only throw. So might as well somebody else sees get string value, they will say where's get int.
Right. I mean, the only reason I'm hesitant is because, you know, Jeremy just said that it's the guideline. My problem is that if that's true, we have to add a whole bunch of throwing methods right now. We added a ton of try methods that don't have a non-try
exactly.
equivalent.
And also, like, so this is just a helper for constructing the exception.
Mainly.
I know where you're heading with. I wouldn't go there.
Where I'm
Like
just
for
getting,
exposing a helper method to construct the exception seems very heavy-handed.
I'm basically no, that's not where I was going. Is this is such a low-level API? It will be used by Ason and me,
And Steve,
and
harder.
maybe.
Well, because he's writing
Do
the
we
serializer on
we
top of
need
this.
this helper?
It'll be used by whoever's writing the ASP.NET config system as well.
Why would they not use the serializer?
Because they probably just want to. If you know what values you're reading straight up, if you know what types you expect, just call these methods straight up.
So, but
Like
would
the
the
Maybe.
person writing the code, would people who write configuration system Ason, would we use this helper?
Yeah, because right now they use APIs like read as int32, read as x from JSON.NET.
Yeah, this is again, if you're assigning it into a field that is of that type, your only recourse if it returns false is to throw. So why make everyone write that boilerplate?
I mean, to be fair, I think this API will be used as much as JSON reader is being used, right? Because it's effectively the same thing. And this one is used about 9% of our API port telemetry. So it's more than the 5 people, right?
Yeah.
So in that sense, I mean, I think making the API, I mean, it's a ref track, but pretty much for all other intents and purposes, it's pretty much as usable as any other reader is in the framework.
The thing is, if you don't have these Git methods, you're going to run into what Jeremy mentioned a few weeks ago people do, which is they call the try method and don't even look at the return value and just use the out.
Yeah.
Because they're like, of course the token type was number. I called try get in 32. Of course it's going to succeed.
Yeah.
Why would I ever check for failure?
Yes, that was the VB. VB regularly calls it .try parse, and on page 2 of GitHub results, I found someone who checked the return value.
Yeah.
So the get APIs, they throw invalid operation in the token type mismatches, and O of the exception if the number doesn't fit.
Yeah.
Is that fine?
I think it's kind of the same how our parse method works. I think if you pass in null for the string, you also throw argument null and say, no, you have to give us something we actually can't parse.
Yeah, but that's the caller made a mistake at that point. Which again, here.
But again,
Yeah, you could argue the
to
same
go to
thing, yeah.
int.parse, so if we look at int.parse, it's format exception if the number makes no sense. But that was already handled because move would have failed. This isn't the number.
Hello,
Yeah.
Stephen. Oh,
I
you
guess
can't hear us,
If we
actually.
get the decimal point on try get it 30.
Hello, Stephen.
So
Hello.
it's do we want the 2 from this isn't an integer or just the overflow that doesn't fit?
What if the underlying int textual representation cannot be parsed?
Then the reader would have already thrown an exception.
But yeah, move through.
Which reader?
The JSON reader, before you call this API, before you even know the token type of number,
And what is the exception that you throw?
JSON reader exception with the message and line position and
So why do we throw an exception at that point? Maybe I have my own parser.
Then you have your own parser.
No. I have my own parser for the value of the float.
Because it's not JSON.
we throw for invalid JSON.
If you write 123.q, that is not a legal JSON file.
But he won't throw until
Okay.
he sees the queue.
So
Yeah.
But the token type never said number.
Yeah.
You were before that one, and then you said move to the next value, and
Yeah.
it said error I can't because I walked off the cliff and I exited my state machine.
I see. So it throws if it's not compliant with JSON number specification. I
Yeah.
see. Okay, I I think that's fine.
Alright, so then any other reason we wouldn't approve it? 'Cause it seems-
Steven? Also, should we, in terms of naming, should we drop the value suffix?
We should make it consistent with the other one.
But that was part of it. Like, in
Yeah.
both cases, should we drop it?
Oh, why do we call the other ones try get int32 value and not
Yeah.
just try get int?
Or
Because
try
you have the out
get
parameter to tell you the overload resolution. Is that what you're saying?
No,
No,
but
just
why don't we
skip the
just drop
value
the value?
suffix
So
in the
that's part of the
Yeah.
in the try method.
yeah, that's part of the
Oh,
discussion.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, let's just drop value of
get int 32
Yeah.
and try get int 32.
Get string, get boolean.
Yes.
I
Okay.
want to come back to what Jeremy mentioned. A
Can you
minute
go back
ago.
to any other questions?
What did you mention?
Overflow exception.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
So yeah, that's the on the should try get or sorry should get int 32 match int.parse of throws a format exception if it's a floating point number and overflow exception if it just doesn't fit. Or should it just say overflow? I don't fit here.
I don't think overflow makes sense for the I contain a decimal place.
No, so it could just be it should match what the primitive .parse would do. That's an easy answer.
I think honestly in practice it doesn't matter.
Well, I mean, really, it just means that all that he has to do is call the underlying thing .parse, not that he has a string.
I mean, like,
no. The underlying method stops. I think it stops parsing, and for example, if you parse an int, it parses still it can, and then says I couldn't parse anymore.
Int.
There are two different. Well, there are two different functions, two different behaviors. Binary primitives .parse or .read do what you just said, Christoph. Int.parse, which works with chars rather than bytes, assumes the full length.
Yeah, I understand. It's just this one is UTF-8 based, so it basically has the behavior of the UTF-8 parser.
Well, I was saying, should we have the two exceptions that match int.parse? Of you asked for this as an integer, but it's not integral, and well, it's bigger than an integer.
Like innocence.
Or should it just be overflow exception of I can't shove this value into that container?
So I don't think it should be overflow exception, and the reason I say that is I just ran a quick sample program where I tried converting a floating point to an integer, like 42.1 to an integer, inside of a checked block, and I did not see an overflow exception. Didn't see an exception at all. strangely
Right,
enough.
because floating point, we don't do IEEE floating point exceptions. We just do the no exception behavior, which is
Yeah.
everything rounds and you don't get a non-exact
Yeah.
exception.
So from that, overflow exception is probably not the right exception. But so invalid format exception or whatever.
Well, I mean,
Well, but what
Format
happens
exception.
when you
Yeah.
try to, in a checked block, cast a very large long to int?
Still same thing. It's IEEE operation, so no exception.
Really?
Wait.
check
No,
long to
it-
int is
no.
Oh no,
long
I
to
thought you
int.
said long to
Yeah.
float.
Ah.
yeah, long to
Yeah.
int overflow
Long to
exception.
int will throw.
Which basically is the example here. Let's say you have a
Yeah.
number, it's very long, lots of digits, and then you try to parse it as an int.
yeah, that's overflow
Yeah.
exception. That's very obviously int.parse says that is overflow exception.
Yeah.
Of I hit the maximum that I could store in int 32 and you had more data.
Yeah.
The question is when it runs into a period or an e, is that format exception or overflow exception? Format exception is what int.parse does.
I'd probably just say format exception.
Again, it would just match the semantics of int.parse.
Yeah.
So
Well, is that something where we should tell the user whether or not the number string has a decimal point or an e in it? That way they know this is definitely some kind of integer, or
Again, the reason they're calling this method is their schema says this must be a 32-bit
Okay.
integral value. Any exception is an exception, and if they want to write two catches, then they should have called the try methods. So,
So if we throw more than two exceptions, then we throw a third one, which is format exception.
Well, you could throw format exception in all cases instead of just overflow exception, right? Because the error message would just say, "Here's the
again,
string I got. I can't convert it to an int32."
like
I don't think we should have three exceptions. We should have two. One is fix your program,
Yeah.
and the other one is you have bad data, so
And
whatever.
I'm actually trying to remember. It doesn't Jeremy? You're citing int.parse, but is it in? There's something. I forget what it is. There's a difference somewhere between a constructor and a parse method. Maybe I'm thinking of GUID. Somewhere it only throws format exceptions from parse, but then from the constructor it sometimes throws overflow.
Fair enough.
Makes
I
sense.
know because I recently looked at
Hello.
int.parse, and it's like argument null exception, overflow exception, and format exception. So
Okay.
it definitely distinguishes the two.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's important to distinguish the two. I think that overflow is fine for this value didn't fit in that container. Because the decimal part, it overflowed the container.
Yes.
It went somewhere I didn't have bits for.
I mean, honestly, like the question is, would you ever write different catch handlers, right?
And I think when int.parse was written and there was no like, how do I fall back, knowing the distinction was relevant.
Right.
I think for here, just saying overflow exception in all cases it doesn't fit is fine.
Sure.
That or phone exception. I mean, I think just having one exception is the key, because otherwise it's like, well,
I mean, if
I'm
I
not
think-
writing
I
different
think-
logic there.
I think the int.parse one. No, I'm late. So that was the next one. I think int.parse was written back when we thought exception types meant something, and now that we found out that the only way to do .NET is Pokemon handling.
So I would just stick with overflow exceptions.
So do we need other numeric types?
I got the reference.
Yeah.
You catch them all.
Yeah.
Come on, guys. That's
Do we need other numeric types like get in 16, get UN64?
You had them, didn't you?
No.
Oh, he doesn't
you
have
have
it.
on
Unsigned
somewhere.
in 16, in 16, all of the other
So
ones.
so uint64. So there are two types that are missing from the standard matrix, which is uint32 and uint64.
Yeah.
What about in 16?
Well, so that's it from the standard matrix. So then from the expanded matrix, then we have int16, and then from the extremely expanded matrix, we have int8.
Well, I mean, the question is like, I think for this reader, I don't think it matters that much because these are the types people actually use in practice. But if you have a serializer and you want to support any type, then whatever we said earlier about the serializer being able to have the standard way of doing things, then at that point you probably want to support them all.
Well, I think it would make sense to add uint64. If we think that uint32 isn't going to be common, the serializer can just downcast in a checked cast uint64 to uint32. That would be the same exception as if it called get uint32.
That's
What is an
also
overflow
more
exception?
expensive to do because then you have to do 64-bit multiplication
Yeah.
on a 32-bit system.
What about people who are bringing in like Unix epoch text? Like that would be uint32.
I mean, so we can add uint32 and uint64. I don't know that we need int16 and uint64.
But you can also, I mean, for anything that's missing, you can also just fall back to binary primitives.parse, right? Or .read.
You can. I'm just pointing, like the uint32 is the I don't expect negative numbers and I expect something exceeding 2 billion.
Right, I'm fine adding some. I just want to say it's not the end of the world if we're not complete here.
Right.
Fair enough.
The other one is should be renamed to remove the type name. Like try get int 32, just say try get int because we have
That does not follow the
Yeah,
.NET
you use the
design
.NET
guidelines. You have to use
Or is
the
it,
framework type because language-specific differences.
Unless you say the word.
The other option would be try get value, which we use, on dictionary and things like that, and just have it distinguished by the out.
But then the non-tries and the tries don't.
unless we
match,
also
which
have
is
out.
fine.
Unless we have the get methods be void returning and also have out.
Which you were advocating a few minutes ago.
Excuse me, what?
No, Christoph was. Christoph
Oh.
said don't return anything ever again.
Yes.
Just make everything out and overload yourself.
The type name needs to have a
And now that Jared's here, that's
the
even funny.
API needs to have a type name in it.
What was-
Avoid
sorry.
overload resolution.
No methods are ever going to
If
return
we had
again.
a void
Everything's going to
returning
be out
API
parameters.
that had out down the
Wow.
type nothing
That's
overload.
harder to
Actually,
use, though.
you know,
But why is that better? It's like this.
You see, he doesn't think that it's a
You
crazy
just throw it
idea.
in without
no,
the
I was going to say
type.
something
reported
else,
to him
but I'm
too
not
long.
sure if I'm poking a button on that.
It makes it harder to call.
If only we could
Yeah.
return two things with a single parameter in public APIs.
Yeah, we can. As
Jared's
long as
fired.
it's
I couldn't help myself, Steven. They set it up.
You're out of here.
We haven't even talked about tuples yet. Like,
All right.
Help it. They were over there poking at me.
So,
Right.
So obviously,
I think we.
so let's close on this one. So
I think we
okay.
agreed on try get it 32.
Yes.
Get it 32. Drop the suffix value.
Sorry. Hold on.
I want to relinquish my hour.
So we agreed on stripping the value suffix. We agreed on which types to add.
uint 32 and uint 64.
uint 64 and uint 34, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Said it in the wrong order.
Or long and ulong. Sorry,
Yeah.
uint and ulong. And then make the names match.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it.
We should also.
I believe it's an unsigned long.
C++ naming was
No,
never
it's an
great.
unsigned, long.
Oh, yes.
Long integer.
Yes.
What about a signed char? Should we add signed char support here?
It's a Russian nesting doll of keywords.
We have signed charts called
That's
short.
right. Oh, yeah.
Oh, Jan mentioned that we should remove the decimal one.
I don't know that decimal definitely doesn't feel standard.
No, I think we discussed this on the other side on the writer, right? I think
Yeah.
my argument would be that decimal is common enough in anybody who ever deals with money.
It's also a case of you can't parse it as float and then convert back because of precision loss.
Yeah.
It's the same reason why you don't want to like parse as float and then cast int when you have a method that can parse and round exactly as int.
Anyway, if we think decimal will be common, then having it. My argument is I'm the only person in the world who uses big integer, so it probably doesn't.
Yeah, big
belong until we
integer.
get more usage data.
I wouldn't add necessarily.
I've never used decimal. I don't know if any of our customers use decimal.
Have you ever dealt with money?
The convention in money is you store it in the smallest representable denomination as an integer.
You
Yeah.
say that, but that's rarely the case. Like, I mean, almost all cases when I export or import data from SAP, for example, has always had periods.
Well,
in it.
that's because they're showing it to you as a human instead of showing it to you as a.
No, that's actually literally the CSV files we get.
I mean,
Not the purpose.
But again, if there's any concern about it, you can always do it by getting the value and just instead of saying try get decimal value, you can say binary primitives read
Sure.
value.
Yeah, I think Jan's just asking the question of do we think it's actually going to be used, and I don't know the answer.
I can.
I mean, the serializer would call
Let
it.
me
obviously.
check.
Can you
Maybe
really
I can.
use binary primitives though in case that the value that the number had unsupported characters? Like
Yeah, then
something
it'll tell you how many it read, and you compare it against the length.
So if it helps, JSON reader doesn't have it.
So
But-
James didn't think it was needed.
Yeah.
Really?
Well,
Yeah.
the deserializer
Have
would
big
handle
integer
it
but didn't have
regardless.
decimal?
So you would have to.
I don't think they have big
Like
integer
you
either.
order.
So he has Boolean, byte, char, datetime, so he has decimal on the writer, but not on the reader? What? Am I looking at the
I
wrong
thought
one?
he had both.
Never mind. He has read as decimal. I
Like
can- I
the
just can't
scenario
read.
for that is like I have a shopping cart API. It returns JSON. I'm just reading it, right? Like that's going to be.
Yeah,
It's going to contain a decimal point.
Yeah, if we think that it's useful, then
Yeah.
it's reasonable.
What is true though is that read as decimal, as far as I can tell, is not used.
Yeah.
Well, it's not used where?
In our telemetry. Neither on NuGet.org, neither on API port.
GitHub.org doesn't have it?
Well, I don't have telemetry for GitHub, right? I mean,
Read as decimal is a pretty unique name. That would probably for C# probably give us a good read. I mean, just Google GitHub. Not Google GitHub. Jesus, search on GitHub.
can I GitHub Google?
I don't think they can scale. They need the
Read as decimal. Let me start to search that.
Yeah,
Code.
there's some matches.
11,000 hits.
Yeah.
But how many of them are actually from the JSON reader? Let me do.
click
There
on
are-
C#.
At least
So
on the
here's
front page
this first
for
one is
reader dot-
stock stuff.
Things that include
JSON
JSON reader and read
converter.
as decimal or
Oh, you
9,000.
selected
Yeah.
Let's just go to page.
And this all looks like unique
99,
code.
see what-
Well, these two are duplicates of each other, but
So this may be missing some people who use var, but
JSON reader.
Yeah, it's all JSON.
Okay.
We're seeing a lot of JSON reader stuff on.
I mean, 12,000 is like in the grand scheme not that much, but yeah, it's. I mean, it is used, right?
I mean, that's just the values that the GitHub search engine can
Yeah.
match.
so I mean,
Codeplex search.
it seems fine.
Yeah, I don't think removing buys us much. Let me put it this way.
Sure.
Might as well just add it.
But big integer complicates things for no value.
Yeah.
So I would leave that one out until we feel it's necessary, and then it can be added later as an extension.
And if we did add it, I would also expect a big float type.
Oh, first we'd have to define one.
I'm working on a
Or just
proposal eventually.
JavaScript
backlog.
number.
I want float 16 and float 8.
Well, JavaScript number is double.
Float 8 is non.
Well,
JSON
not
JSON number is arbitrary precision.
Yeah.
well. Really?
Yeah.
Isn't that
I
big?
thought that
integer effectively?
JavaScript number is also arbitrary precision, but implemented as double, which
The ECMAScript
because
spec
arbitrary
says all
means
numbers are-
we
are
won't tell you
doubles.
what the precision is.
The
Okay.
ECMAScript spec says all numbers are whatever the fancy word for double is. IEEE 764 dat whatever.
754
See,
2008.
thank you.
Why would you even know that?
Because otherwise
Because
you
I'm
can't
having to do all the
you
fixes.
can't implement the first half of the spec of all the crap you have to do to and from a number.
All right, so we have 10 minutes in the second part.
That's fine. I'll try to be fast.
Oh, you say that, but it's not you. It's us.
Are we broadcasting?
We are. So
So Steve fired me publicly.
it's the only way we fire people here.
For everyone listening, I do not have that power.
You should add, unfortunately.
You might wish you did.
Oh God, I can't find it now. Where did the email go?
Oh, I can.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. I found it.
We should start with 33492.
Okay. I think I just ordered them in the same one that you gave
Yeah.
them to me, which I think is the one you wanted, right?
So what this is last week we introduced system text rune, and it's an abstraction for an arbitrary Unicode scalar value, and the idea is if we want people to start using this type, we're going to have to start lighting up usage of this type throughout our other APIs.
Right.
So places on string, string builder, and others where we take in char and allow you to do things like searching, index of, so on, we should also take in runes. For something like system string, I don't think it will be as common to do as it would be on something like UTF-8 string, but it makes sense to mirror the APIs. It makes sense to kind of light this up as a first-class citizen.
It does improve support for surrogates.
Yeah, it does. So what this is on the screen here is I went through system string, found a bunch of APIs that operated on system.char specifically, and then wondered if we should make rune-consuming equivalents of those methods. And that's all this is. Also, there are a few missing char overloads that I added here just for completeness. So that's up.
And the APIs that let me enumerate runes in a string that were already approved.
Those are already checked in,
Yeah.
in fact. The only thing you're seeing here is the diff.
So
Can you scroll down? Is there more?
is that
Yeah,
only
there's
you
more.
reviewed only string APIs or kind of in general APIs that take a char?
Sorry? I didn't get the question.
Did you do just string, or did you
Yeah.
do all of the BCL?
I did. This review specifically is for string, string builder, and that text writer. So just like the things that manipulate, the things that are string or string-like specifically. That's all. I didn't want to bog this down with a lot of stuff.
Are there any concerns with doing that? I mean, like it seems generally speaking, like they're overloads, so the concept count is not increased.
I
Seems
will
straightforward.
I will ask the one devil's advocate question of do we want things like the last index of taking a start index and a count, or do we want to just encourage people to move over to span-based things? If we say, well, there's already the one overload, we're making the other, that's fine. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah.
I also have a
Were you deliberate with the parameter names here?
The parameter names match exactly what the char overloads take.
That's what I was going to ask.
And if there's a mistake here in this review, I would use whatever the char overloads are called.
That's fine. I just
Char overloads have trim rune.
The char overloads have trim char
Yeah.
and old char and new char.
And
So why are you using optional parameters in one case but not the other?
It matches again what char does.
Is there so I'm just curious, like there's no reason to do that, and like there's no practical reason to do that anymore though. Is that one that like it why would we not just say that it's
Unless IntelliSense messes up the sorting.
Sorry, which one in particular? This
The first one.
method?
top
Or-
two contains ends with index of the first and last index of first and last,
Oh, okay.
And you could the middle index of and last index of you could collapse.
Are
I
these that you
assume.
actually have an optimized implementation for the non-overload?
I do actually, yes.
Okay, if that's
But that's
if
there are
that's
yeah.
a reason, that's a valid one.
There are outstanding issues to make the jitter understand that a little bit better so that it can optimize the parameter full one as much as it does the parameterless ones.
Yeah, I think, but to Jared's question, I think most of the reason is because we had existing methods and we didn't introduce them, and so we just tried to match what was there.
Right, but
Versus the new ones here,
yeah.
like this one, for example, we added this, I think, like
sure.
somewhere in CoreFX, so we said, oh, we don't want to add 2 methods, let's just add 1.
And I'm just asking
Yeah.
why. I understand like matching as a starting point, but from a compiler perspective, like those first 2 methods, like why have them? It's just
Well,
it's just giving us more metadata to parse.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's an
That's fine.
implementation reason why we would be adding it, we're not. It's a
what
conceptual
I'm saying.
overload, but the implementation can be much better if it doesn't need to look at the second parameter. That's fine, but otherwise, I would agree with the point Jared's raising, and we should just start collapsing things down the way that we would do it if we were doing it.
We can totally do
At
that.
the same time, if we start doing that more, we should follow up with the IDE about IntelliSense, because right now, as far as I've seen, it's ordering by the IntelliSense overloads by number of arguments, and it's not factoring in things that are defaults. So, 5 arguments where 4 of them are optional still shows up at the end of the IntelliSense list.
And that was my other question: is does IntelliSense not do the right thing here? And
So because of that, I wonder if, like, for such a core type as string, we should just not
just do
keep
the
doing what
duplicate what we already
basically
have.
do what Levi has here.
Well, do we want these as instance methods rather than extension methods? Because, I mean, we've already done it for span, we're doing it for Rune. If we also add another type in the future, are we also going to add them to string rather than as extension methods and just keep blowing up string until it's,
I think
1,000 APIs?
extension methods are harder to use than instance methods. So for very core types, I would just like make them as simple as possible, meaning add instance methods, add overloads.
And the other reason we did it for span was because we wanted, in many cases, to specialize on the T, right? Versus here, it's like we don't care, right?
But I would say, like, let's say we start a completely new type. We create a new type, and it's not, like if we start a new type, I would use new language features. It's just like for an existing type, mixing language features and that existed 15 years ago and today, it's like it just makes it really like somebody has to understand, for example, why the differences are here, or they may wonder.
And the fact that IntelliSense will paint the 2 different ins with different icons because one's a method and the other one's an extension method.
Exactly. And in the documentation, they show up in different space. And so one question I have about the Rune the method that replaces runes. So when they are chars, you know what's the size of the resulting string, but when they are runes, you don't, correct?
In this case, correct. If the runes themselves are of different UTF-16 sequence lengths, then yes, you don't know how many things will get replaced until you run the algorithm.
So how do you do 2-pass?
That would have to be a 2-pass, yes.
Well, unless you ask, are these 2 runes the same size? In which case, that it'll be.
Yeah, I mean we can optimize that under the covers. However,
Are we okay with that? Like, is it?
I mean, replace is already expensive.
I mean,
think
replace
this one-
string does the same thing.
Type is incorrect.
Right. So if you have replaced
okay.
string, old string,
Okay, I buy that. Yeah, makes sense.
So a few things that are interesting to call out here. We were talking about maybe having string comparison be an optional argument. The devil's advocate against that, in addition to what was already said, is the default parameter would not be default. The default value would be value 4, which is ordinal, as opposed to value 0, which is current culture.
Is that how we do it everywhere? No.
String is a very special type.
I know.
All of the string methods which take char as a value and do not take a string comparison are all ordinal, all of them. And I follow that exact same pattern here. Methods which do not take a string comparison are all ordinal. Methods which do take a string comparison, well, you specify it.
Wait, that's not.
For
Sorry,
methods which
so
take
like-
a char, that's the case. For methods which take a string, it's a crapshoot.
But there's a difference here between Rune and Char with regards to ordinal or, current culture, right? I mean, if you do index of Char, well, I guess I have some missing gap in my knowledge.
Yeah.
What does it mean to do starts with Char and a comparison other than ordinal? Ignore your case.
You could
The S set.
the S set is a little different.
I asked that question yesterday too.
It's complicated.
It is very complicated. There is a concept in Unicode called full folding versus simple folding for case comparisons. When you do index of and you specify any string comparison other than ordinal, then we use full folding semantics under the covers when we do case comparison and case conversion. If you specify ordinal or ordinal ignore case, we use simple case folding semantics. And if you go on unicode.org, there's a gigantic table of which conversions are valid for simple and which conversions are valid for full. So you actually can get different answers based on the two.
Also ignore case.
Yeah.
But yeah, ignore case, I mean, that's obvious.
Yeah, but I mean, like ordinal versus invariant culture, like you can go on the Unicode case folding table and you can find values that are going to give you one answer using ordinal and a different answer using invariant culture, even when we're talking about single code points.
And even when we're talking about the very first character?
Well, the very first character is no different than contains or whatever, and just checking to make sure that the index is 0, right?
Well, it is if it was the second half of a surrogate pair.
Sorry, I don't get what you meant by that.
If you're asking about starts with, you're asking about, again, this could be a gap in my knowledge, but you're asking about the very first character in the string, which means nothing could have come before it, which means you couldn't be interpreting that character based on anything previous in the string. And so it's not.
Yeah.
So you're not accidentally on a split surrogate. The char one could be on a split surrogate.
Well, but the,
Yeah.
the character in this context means Rune.
Yeah.
So
No, well, I'm specifically talking about the char overload. Like,
yeah, but the
I'm
char
trying to-
is kind of should be Rune.
I'm checking.
Correct.
I'm looking for an example. I'm just trolling through the
So
Unicode
this
spec
is
right now.
okay. This is I think I can explain it. So imagine that inside the string there is a double char Rune. You pass a single char that is equivalent when you compare it to the double char Rune. Well, then they compare as equal.
I don't think that would ever happen in practice, to be honest. When you do full folding, what we're really checking for is full folding generally expands characters, so it'll take like the German S character and turn it into 2 Latin S's. So it is possible that things like starts with char string comparison will never have a different behavior in ordinal versus invariant. It is possible that that's the case.
In which case, do we don't need those overloads?
Well, you definitely
You need
need
the
ignore
ignore
case.
case.
And you need something that allows current culture as opposed to invariant culture. And string comparison does kind of encompass all of that.
Yeah.
So, for example, the Turkish I, if you're using the invariant culture, the uppercase dotless Turkish I and the lowercase dotless Turkish I believe in invariant culture ignore case return different, and in Turkish ignore case, I believe they return the same. But I would need to check that. If only Tarek were here.
That's fair. Everything comes down to the Turkish eye.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the German S set. And then anything that happens to be equivalent inside and outside the BMP. But I don't know about any of those.
Outside the BMP, there are some things to find.
Well, I mean, that something inside the BMP that is equivalent to something outside the BMP. Like, if there's like super oblique math hollow 1,
Yeah.
being equal to.
No, case folding will never cause BMP and SMP to cross each other.
Okay.
Unicode guarantees that, I believe.
So these APIs don't require any culture specification.
The culture is
The culture info?
the culture goes through the string comparison enum.
But that just doesn't tell you which culture to use, whether to use invariant or not. It doesn't tell you use this culture.
Well, it does. It tells you there's current, invariant, and ordinal.
You
are the
would
three
have to
options.
set the culture.
If you're doing specific,
yeah.
you'd have to now move to the culture.
I believe so. I have. If we scroll down, you should actually see overloads on text info.
Yeah. Sorry, here.
Yeah, 2 lower and 2 upper kind of handle that as well for arbitrary cultures, because you can get the text info for an arbitrary culture, and then if you want to see if 2 things are the same for an arbitrary culture, you perform the same case conversion on both of them and then do a regular equality check.
But like I think I asked this yesterday, don't we need like a text info like basically that compares two rules on the two that they're equivalent?
Not necessarily, because the way that you do it with case folding is you just, if you want to compare if 2 things are the same, you 2 lower both of them and then just compare the values.
Okay. I guess for rules doesn't matter.
For individual scalars, you can do that. Yeah.
All right. So then I think we discussed string, right?
We discussed string. I also have comments in there saying like there are some overloads I didn't bother.
Oh, you have this guy now,
enlightening.
though. You have which is basically the same thing. Oh, I guess
Yeah.
you can still cannot specify the culture, but
Yeah, so that's just seeing if 2 things are equal. Just for completeness. I think you and I talked about this yesterday. String builder, again, these APIs are matching what's on. These APIs are matching existing char overloads, except for getRuneAt and tryGetRuneAt, which are new methods to mimic what's on string.
And usually we wouldn't make that an instance method as well.
Sorry?
Like, I mean, we already have equals instance method on Rune, right? That just takes the other, right?
Right. That's
Should we
what I
have
was
one
curious.
for other and
okay.
comparison type?
Yeah.
This is one like why would you? This I'll do my default operator question again. Optional parameter question again.
We would default it to a non-zero value if that's okay.
That's fine.
Okay.
Well, I guess it doesn't help you in that case because you probably want to implement I-equatable on Rune, right? In which case you have to implement it to. Sorry, a singular one.
Well,
Well, it already is I-equatable.
no.
I mean,
I-equitable only affects instance methods.
Yeah.
These are static methods.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If we move this to a that was my question. Like, is there any reason why this wouldn't be just instance methods? Because they cannot be null by definition.
Because they're structs, yeah.
And like, I mean, char is a fine example where some of the static methods really should have been instance methods because they're super awkward to use.
Okay.
Like, I don't know.
We can totally make it an instance method. That's fine. The first one goes away because it already exists as an instance method, and then the second one, well, it wouldn't be an optional parameter.
Yeah, it can't be.
It would have to be. There would have to be a distinct overload because of interface matching.
Yeah.
And so, do we
That's fine.
currently implement some of the interfaces, comparison interfaces?
Rune supports I-comparable, I-equatable, and that's it. And there are a bunch of other methods hanging off of it for inspection.
And I now forgot that the one that you need to stick this thing in a hash table, I-equatable is enough.
It implements I-equatable and it implements getHashcode, so that's all we need.
Yeah, I think that's. Yeah.
I mean, the implementation of getHashcode is basically like return this isn't.
Didn't we have like an iHashcode provider that we never used or something?
Well, yeah, that's why I got confused. I-equatable is enough if it's to stick the instance.
Yeah.
If you want to implement your own comparator, there's a special comparator for hash tables.
Yeah.
Something.
I think I know what you mean.
Yeah. I-equality
comparator.
I-equality comparer, I think is the
Yeah.
one that has both of them, yeah.
Yeah, but this can be used through the default comparers because it implements the correct interfaces.
And so, okay, string builder getRuneAt.
Yeah.
What's that mean?
String builder has an indexer for char,
Yeah.
and this matches that.
Well,
Basically.
does
But,
this
and,
mean it
and this
counts-
is indexed in the number of chars.
Index is always a number of UTF-16 code points, a number of chars on string and string builder.
And what does it do when it encounters, like you pointed at the wrong location?
It does the exact same thing string, try getRuneAt, and getRuneAt do. Try getRuneAt will return false, getRuneAt throws an exception.
Right, but you're pointing at a surrogate, and
Yeah.
it's not allowed to do that.
You're pointing at
So
the last part of a surrogate or just something
So
nonsensical.
did string builder already get the root enumerator?
String builder does not have a Rune enumerator.
Because again, we're running into the problem of looking at the Get Rune at API. I think that it's indexing in terms of runes instead of in terms of
Is String Builder already enumerable?
It's not, but we added in either 2.1 or 3.0, I forget which. We added a get chunks, which basically provides an enumerator of read-only memory of char.
So you get rune chunks.
So we could add.
Well, the problem is the rune could span or could be split across the chunks.
That's fine.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't be for chunks. It would just be a rune enumerator.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm just making sure that if what somebody says they want the next rune, the problem with this one, if it's the UTF-16 code points, the moment they hit a surrogate, it goes, yep, you're not allowed to play this game anymore.
No, it would presumably, if we had an enumerator, which is not being proposed here, but if we had one, presumably it could keep track of those splits and just fix them up.
The enumerator could. I'm saying the get rune method. Like the problem is you need to know not to add one to your index, but rune dot how many UTF-16 chars did you take.
I don't see how this is different than these exact same methods on system string.
I had the same problem with them on string.
Oh, because of the index name?
Yes,
Or,
because the problem is that I think that the average developer will think that the index is indexing in terms of runes. I understand the performance that it needs to index in terms of the underlying data structure. I'm just wondering if this API, if Rune itself is a bit of failure.
Would it help to change that parameter name to something other than index?
If it said char index, then like that tells you what you're indexing in. It tells you I'm not a Rune index. I'm a the other thing index.
I would be fine with that. We would have to modify the APIs that are already committed into core CLR core effects, but that should be straightforward.
But so one concern maybe it will work. I would double check whether it's not gonna make it unclear what's the behavior of existing methods that call the parameter index. Like, we don't want to basically, suddenly we have string builder.
Mm-hmm.
It has methods that take either index or char index, and the user is thinking,
well, but the char one takes char index.
Is the index that it's not prefixed with char, is it about chars or something else?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Like today, basically it's, like they are all char indices.
Yeah.
I mean, I would generally say if you're on a type that has a length property and an index are taken an int, if you call anything index on any methods, they're expressed within those bounds. Anything else would be crazy.
Right. The problem with Rune is it's not that you can pass in a value for a Rune index that exceeds length. It's that if it were counting in runes, you would end up before the length. And I think that a lot of people would have get Rune at and then an I++. And it's like they wrote a for loop, and it never occurs to them that I sometimes needs to increase by 2.
So I agree with that, but I think renaming that to char index doesn't fix that problem. Like I think that's a general problem of like when you're using runes, you have to increment by the right size, and like that's a general problem.
To speak to that particular point, I think for people who are reading runes as opposed to individual system.chars, I think that class of developer is going to know to use the property hanging off of Rune, which is how many chars am I?
Yeah, but that's what I'm just saying. I think if we add the Rune enumerator to string builder, then that will help the naive. I just want to walk these runes in order.
Well, it helps more than the naive. Get Rune add on string builders is going to be just as slow as string builders indexer, which is very slow.
That is true. Yes.
Yeah.
What is the property called?
The property on Rune is UTF-16 sequence length.
Okay, I was going to suggest maybe we consider the parameter matching that property, but no.
UTF sequence index.
I thought it might be like char count, and I'm like,
we could call it char count.
All right, Jared's rehired.
You're so fickle.
Sorry, Jared, you're 59.
Things change on a whim here.
Come on.
Expect a good promotion back for you.
Okay. You might be 61 in 2 years if you work really hard.
Anyway, the reason it was called that is because char is, when you're talking about this specifically, like char is a very overloaded term. And we wanted the APIs on this type to be explicit in what they return.
It's fine. So I would index, it's going to match the semantic we have everywhere else, that's fine.
Yeah.
I would add the Rune enumerator as part of this
Because apparently there's the perf benefit and there's the correctness benefit for just, I want the next room. And turns out enumerators are great at what's the next thing.
So where would you add that?
On string builder?
String builder dot enumerate rooms.
Yeah, it matches.
Oh,
the
you mean?
API
Oh, I
name.
see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I thought you want an append overload that takes an enumerator or something.
No.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm asking.
It would basically match exactly what's on system string enumerator rooms.
Sorry.
Okay.
What did we just conclude? We said like we want to have the expose and enumerator. Well, how do we call this guy? What do we call it on string? Get
Enumerate rooms
enumerate rooms. That's what we call it.
is the enumerator.
Enumerate rooms.
Of course, on string builder already has a get method which returns an enumerator. So maybe we should follow that pattern on string builder.
I mean, you would just match what a string does. That seems like the most straightforward thing.
Sure.
Or whatever string does.
What are the semantics would replace that takes turn index and count?
That's the particular sub-segment within the string builder that it's looking in for
Okay,
when
so
it does
that's
replacement.
char based.
Yes. Every place in all of these types where you see index and count are all system.char based. And then text writer, those overloads already exist for char value. I literally copied and pasted.
Yeah,
So
rate
my
async still makes
question
me sad.
for virtuals like this is, what is their default behavior going to be? In this case, are we just calling toString on each and passing it to the string overload?
The default implementation on these would turn it into either a single char or a read-only span of char and plummet through.
Or read-only span of char?
Yeah, so it would stack alloc chars internally.
Got it. Okay.
It would stack Alex 2 chars.
2 chars, yeah.
Well,
Not
not for the async ones.
Not for the async ones, correct. The async ones could borrow an array, fill it, and then return it when the async work is finished.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Sorry, what were you saying?
For the single one, why not just write 2 consecutive chars?
Like two locals?
Because write async for write async, I would assume is because you wouldn't want other write asyncs to interleave.
Right, for the async
Yeah.
one, but why not just for the? Why would you stack out like 2 chars for the?
Once again, what if it's
synchronous one.
interleaves?
I don't know how deep the call stack's going to go inside the text writer, and I don't want to do like a thing.
Yeah, I mean, certainly for rooms that match a single char, you could just defer to char.
And that's going to be the vast majority of them. And if all else fails, like, for whatever reason, if something fails .toString, then just follow through. I mean, it would
I don't
work.
follow your gesture. What happens if you have 2 locals instead of a stack of char?
It's not 2 locals, it's calling write of char twice. You don't know how much work that individual write method's going to be doing, and we don't want this to become a chatty API, even though it looks like it's a single write.
I see.
I mean,
Do
to
we
be
worry about the interleaving? Like, is it even valid to call text writer on multiple threads
I
without
don't-
synchronizing?
I don't
I
think so.
don't think the interleaving is valid, but we don't know what derived implementations are doing. And so imagine there was a derived text writer that wrote 1 character per line, I'd be concerned. I'd be say again?
Console.out. It's a text writer that gets called interleaved.
Really?
Sure,
By
it
who?
does.
Everyone.
Well,
Everyone calls console.out that write line, and then
But that's why it's-
then they already
applications,
have
you get
so
rid of
many
that.
problems, this wouldn't add more.
Yeah, but you tear a rune, you tear the low surrogate and the
Yeah,
high surrogate.
That is
which
true.
would be never a thing that could have happened.
That is true.
Sorry.
Because there's an
I
internal
could buy it,
lock.
but-
There's an internal lock on the console for all writes.
Right. I mean, there's not actually interleave because there's a lock.
Well, I did like 2 threads can be calling right, and so if the
Yeah,
text
but one of them
writer-
will block until the other one completes.
Yeah, I mean we can fix it by the console text writer just implementing these and taking its own lock, but and
which is probably all methods already do. Anyway.
But anyhow, I was going to say, just functionality wise, like imagine there was a text writer where each individual thing was printed on its own line. Logically, you would imagine it would also want the rune to be on its own line and not to be on 2 lines.
Presumably.
Yeah,
So
this is
two-fold.
also kind of a weird implementation of a text writer, but fine.
Well, you could also do it for the async case by just converting it to an int. That is the proper Indianness, and just write that, right?
No, because when you write an
No.
int, it gets written as human readable text. as opposed to just binary splatting out.
Yeah, because it's not a binary writer, it's
Because
text writer.
that turns the number into
Yeah, I
the
would,
thing on the console.
I was thinking
Which by the
binary
way, is
writer.
internally how all of the helper methods I have work. So, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for write async, we still want to return tasks because that's what the existing APIs are doing.
Correct, because I would be taking whatever they return and literally just returning them myself.
Yeah, and even when we've added, I mean, for char, it's a little unfortunate that that's where we ended up. You know, it'd be nice if it was value task. We could consider doing that for the write async. For write line async, I'm less concerned because it's batchy, but we might want to make these return value task maybe, at least the write async.
Okay, I'll look into that. And we would be okay with having the small discrepancy, these returning value task and other APIs returning task, right?
Well, that's why I said might. I mean, there's a significant. Well, actually, well, I don't know. It's hard to say. So for when these things complete synchronously, there's no difference between task and value task for all intents and purposes,
Right.
because you just return a cache task. It's when it completes asynchronously, value task would allow you to be more efficient, but it would seriously complicate the implementation
Sure.
to the point where it's not clear that it's valuable. And to your point, having a difference between task and value task on an overload like that, you kind of have to, if the caller didn't notice and did something like get await or get result to make it a synchronous call or something, or if they tried to store it into a table or something like that,
Sure.
the difference between task and value task becomes significant. So we let's talk about it offline and decide what to do.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I wrote it up, but I think it's thinking.
We should add write slim async.
The two upper, two lower. What is the char equivalent argument name for text info?
I believe it was just called value, but let me check.
Did I miss anything?
Yeah, you called it R. I know.
Yeah, we called it just R.
Oh, then it's called C.
Oh.
Yeah, but
Yes,
I wonder
it's called
whether
char C.
do we
Should we just call it value or
We can
Yeah.
call it value
or Rune?
or lowercase
Rune?
rune.
Yeah.
I've been trying to avoid using that as parameter names, just in case in the far-flung future it does become a language keyword.
But even then, it wouldn't be a result. It would be only valid in
It would
type
be
position.
contextual, right? But
So it can only appear in type positions, right?
It's okay to have var.
Yeah.
it is, yeah.
And it can mean
I just don't want to contribute to that.
I can name my variables var.
why the fuck not?
I didn't know that.
Because you could have
That's
named
awesome.
that before the.
I will
keyword
now
var
start
existed.
using it. Can we have a shortcut?
No,
Just one
because
var.
int was done beforehand, so we know what that means. But you
Can you have
have
a class called partial? You should be
You
able
can
to
name
have
it. You can name a
partial.
variable int. You just have to name it at int.
Yes.
you can have var space partial comma var comma when equals default.
We should add
that's
a type
okay.
called double
Equals
var.
dynamic, actually, that would work too.
You know, we should add a type called double var.
I'm gonna go hide in a corner now. Anyway, yeah. So two upper. The current API takes char with a parameter name of C.
Where the fuck is
So
my
yeah, we
code?
could name it value if we wanted to.
Okay, so let me just. Where was this overload?
Text info.
The last two APIs.
Okay. Text info. Change. What was it? C to value, or what did we say?
R to value.
R to value.
Curse you and your good eyes, catching all of that.
Christoph got it as well. I don't know if you're talking to me or Christoph.
You're the only one that said anything, as far as I can tell. So
Oh, the R.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
that's because my ears were facing this way.
You have directional ears. That's pretty awesome.
Yes.
I can't do that.
You have directional ears too.
Yeah, but I have to literally turn my head.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. I guess that works.
This, HtmlEncode. So one interesting thing about the current HtmlEncoder right now is that there is an abstract method on it, which takes in a pointer as a parameter, which means that if you want to subclass any of our encoders, you actually have to drop down to unsafe code, which is kind of funny. Anyway, all of that said,
You're proposing to add
I'm
abstract
proposing literally to delete the existing classes and say this is what they should look like.
Yeah, you can't add abstract things in the framework,
So HtmlEncoder right now is abstract.
but you can't add new abstract things. That's a completely forbidden.
Yeah, because if you terminally derive from it, then they
Oh
know
yeah,
it.
yeah. It would obviously anyone who derived from this would be completely broken. API, the API telemetry tool says no one is subclassing this, and the reason that I have high confidence that that's correct is because of what I just mentioned, where anybody who subclasses this has to drop down to unsafe code.
No offense, but that doesn't. So I'm sure there is someone out there who's deriving from this.
Probably.
Like our telemetry is not complete, and unsafe isn't really that much of a barrier.
Yeah, but
Maybe.
our breaking changes are thou shalt not add abstract members to existing classes.
If only we had, if only we had major versions in which we could make breaking changes, right?
Yeah, I like the way you think, but
Yeah.
I mean, how often is the type itself used out of curiosity?
So keep in mind, how often is the type? So the type itself is used very frequently because it's the HtmlEncoder type in the framework. However,
You said very frequently, right? The highest usage we have is 0.5%, just so you know.
yes, because most people go through ASP.NET to do it.
Sure, but I mean, it's direct call size, right? Like, if you want to put an upper bound on somebody,
And
sure, probably ASP.NET might have to do some work
Yes.
now, but like, I mean, the
And what
type is
you-
used not a lot.
what
right?
you should be looking at is TextEncoder.encode, I believe.
No, but your argument is like it's okay to add an abstract member, and I'm saying that to me, like who's deriving from it, I can't directly measure easily.
Oh no!
But I can measure the type
that wasn't
usage.
my argument. My argument wasn't it's okay to add an abstract member. My argument was it's okay to tear this entire thing down and redo it. That was what I was trying to
Who designed it in the first place?
Yeah.
argue. So
Wasn't that you, Christoph?
yeah.
No.
So funny that you mentioned that because what I'm trying to do is I'm advocating for the original design of this class. Because I originally designed it, and then I left the team, and then horrible things happened to the type, and now I'm trying to bring
How
my
was
baby
it
back.
designed initially?
Almost
Clearly you didn't
identical
have
to this.
span.
It was designed with text. So all those middle overloads that you see, encode, text writer, char, array, string, blah blah blah. Those were all of the original overloads.
Oh, the text writer ones
Yeah.
based.
The overloads that accepted char star and that exposed kind of the internals, such as does this particular character have to be encoded? Like those were all private methods that were made public before .NET Core 1.0 shipped, much to my great dismay.
So let me get this right. So like, what is the from this entire shape? Like, what is the mapping to what currently exists? Is this all new? Is this no?
The encode methods by and large match what's already there. The default, the factories and constructor match what's already there. And that's it.
The other one also derived from text encoder. You're proposing to not do that anymore?
I'm proposing that class goes away entirely.
Okay, that might be.
I know that would be a very tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, that's just like so. HTML encoder is used 0.5%, and then text encoder is used 0.8%. So like the usage is even higher. So.
Right, but I sent an email off to you about this a few months ago, saying if you look at text encoder's usage, it maps perfectly to HTML encoder's encode usage.
But does mapping will change the fact that it's binary breaking?
Oh, it absolutely is binary breaking.
Yeah.
It's also higher than 5.5%. Like when I log in and I look at API port, it's higher than 0.5%.
Yeah.
So what would it mean if we don't break it? Because it's not clear to
So
me.
if
Like,
you-
is it just a, today, yes, today you have to use unsafe code to implement this type. Is that the only problem that you're trying to?
No, the reason that I want to remove the text encoder base class is I think it encourages developers to do the wrong thing, because you can't. It's not right to take in an arbitrary encoder for the scenario that you're trying to do. Like when you're writing data to the output, like I'm
So
sorry, not
divide-
when you're writing
okay.
data to the output. When you're generating text that's supposed to be sent, that's supposed to be packaged and then sent across a wire, like it's really up to the application to know how that text is supposed to be
But
represented
we are
on the
not
other
doing
end.
breaking changes because of
Yeah.
this philosophy of people should.
And that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, my,
So-
my question would be like, what would the design look like if you wouldn't make breaking changes? Like, how bad would it be compared to the cleanup?
So if you weren't making breaking changes, text encoder would stay. All of the original abstract methods would stay, and then instead of being abstract, they would be virtual and call into these helpers, most likely. The only three abstract methods here are the property max output characters per input character. That already exists today. The Rune must be encoded method would call that maps kind of to an existing abstract method, which is called will encode, and takes in an int as a parameter. And the try encode Rune method would maybe map to an existing abstract method, which is try encode scalar.
What does it take? An int?
Try encode scalar, the existing abstract method, takes the scalar as an integer, a char star buffer, a buffer length, and outs the number of characters written.
So also, I was under the impression that you're doing this work to enable UTF-8 encoding.
Partially.
What is,
So-
but this feature doesn't seem to be doing anything with UTF-8. So,
So
what is
this-
this for?
So this feature, if you look at the abstract methods, this redefines the type to be abstractly written in terms of runes. And then all of the methods that are not abstract that are being proposed here are written in terms of UTF-16 strings. Once everything is redefined in terms of just raw runes, you can now add UTF-8 APIs to this, which are not shown here. And there was discussion further in the issue regarding it.
So I wonder whether it wouldn't be better to do two of these features together.
Okay.
And I'll tell you the reason why I'm saying that is I wonder if for UTF-8 you would ever even call the rune methods. Because
They wouldn't.
yeah, exactly, because you would want to do the encoding in bulk, correct?
Yeah, so what you would do is, like, you see how all of these UTF-16 methods are virtual? The HtmlEncoder would override all of them and provide an optimized implementation, but the base class text encoder's implementation would just be written in terms of the abstract methods. And that's also what the UTF-8 APIs would do. The base implementation would be written in terms of the abstractions, and the subclass type would provide an optimized implementation.
Well, except try encode rune outputs to a char buffer. So
Because that matches the current API.
I know
Yeah.
my point still stands. I'm not sure whether it's valid to do these two work items separately.
Okay.
Because we may end up with APIs that then you cannot use to implement UTF-8.
So we could also say that the UTF-8 encoder is just a different type entirely. That
Exactly, and
exposes no
then
UTF-16
the
APIs.
question is why are we changing this type, especially that it's used by 0.5% of people, and nobody implements custom types. Do you buy that?
So you're
That's a
saying
fair
as,
question.
as your breaking change, do HtmlEncoder 2 or EX?
I mean, so I think it's entirely possible that we cannot do UTF-8 within this type. Then I would say, like, let's just leave the types as are and add new ones.
Yeah.
And if it can be done within this type, then we'll do both of the features at the same time. Otherwise, we may be checking in APIs that then don't work and need to be verified.
Wait, so they ship in a separate assembly, right?
They do, yes. However, the UTF-8 JSON encoder will have to take a dependency on the UTF-8 version of this.
No, but if you honestly think the types are horribly broken, right, and we could put them in a new assembly and then people stop eventually using the old one, right? It would not
no.
require
So
them
for
all to be-
UTF-16,
Why would the UTF-8 JSON encoder care about an HTML encoder?
It would use a JavaScript string encoder, which is one of the sister types of this, but it follows the exact same API shape.
Oh, so not the HTML.
Yeah, not this. This is
Yeah.
I'm using this as a surrogate for like all three of them together.
Gotcha.
so I don't believe these types are broken. It's just they are not easily adaptable to UTF-8.
That is correct. They are,
For UTF-16,
they are
they
not,
work quite well.
They can be adapted to UTF-8. It's just you have to do maybe more glue than we're willing to do.
Yeah.
So what would that look like then? We would say either, so we would have new types, they would just prefix with UTF-8 and then just have
and put it in
UTF-8.
the same package because they are OOPs, correct?
Or they have to
yeah,
be
you can do
inbox
that.
probably for ASP.NET, right?
Well,
You can put it in the
probably
same
OOP
package.
from NetCore app, but inbox for ASP.
It's not
Which-
inbox for NetCore app. It has to be inbox for ASP.NET because they have
Yeah.
dependency on it. Yeah.
Which basically makes it inbox, right? It's just in a different layer, but yeah, doesn't matter. But yeah. So you said our JSON reader would depend on it though? Or
Our
just-
JSON reader would have to depend on the JavaScript string encoder
in which
version.
case we either move the JSON reader to the ASP.NET shared framework or we push the other one.
Or sorry, the JSON writer, not the JSON reader.
Well, they're both in the same
Yeah.
package, right? So
I mean,
yeah.
it would eventually need to depend on the UTF-8 JSON encoder. It could, in the meantime, have its implementation of the UTF-8 JSON encoder.
It could. SDL forbids that. This type is the one true type that's approved by SDL.
Yeah, I mean, it turns out that we're the people who tell
Yeah.
people that they
Yeah.
don't need to follow it. So. Like we would need if you're saying we would need a new type for UTF-8 JavaScript encoder, then we already have a situation that you can't follow the SDL. You need a new type. And then
Well,
the
that's
SDL.
that's why this type. That's why I'm bringing this type up for review and modification.
Right, but then Christoph says defer
Yeah.
it until.
Oh yeah. This review by itself isn't enough to satisfy Essence requirements,
Right.
and maybe they do need to be brought together. Yeah.
I think the SDL argument is mostly you want to have a single entity you can patch, right?
It's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
just
So
that.
I'm saying
the
if-
behavior of this is very different than the behavior of the other built-in encoders.
Until we if we have the public one, then it would call the public one. But
Yeah.
until we have a public one, then the JSON writer could have the first
Yeah,
one
yeah.
that's implementing the behavior.
Sure.
Uh,
I mean, the question then is, so, yeah, I think this one I will probably bounce back to you and say that come back with a proposal that is not breaking, and maybe have a comparison, and then, I mean, it always comes up, right? ASP.NET does make breaking changes in 3.0. Like,
Yeah.
why wouldn't be able to do making changes in 3.0 if the assembly that we entertain the idea for is effectively just in the ASP.NET shared framework, right? If the usage is low enough, we could have the conversation. I mean, like, we always talked about doing breaking changes, but I would say I would rather start this conversation with the type where the value add of doing a breaking change is enormous, right? Which is
So-
here is like I don't see the value add as being that big. Versus in ASP.NET's case, getting rid of JSON.NET and the underlying plumbing and replacing with something else is a valuable breaking change, right? This seems to be mostly I don't know, like aesthetics or philosophical design point where it's like if you make it incremental, make it meaning
there are
additive, you
two
might
different
might
aspects.
be
One is this.
might be
There's a
better.
now polymorphic hierarchy that Levi doesn't like. The second one, which is, it's not clear whether UTF-8 will be, we can add it to this type without either like just horrible hacks, or the alternative is to fix up this type such that it, UTF-8 can be added without hacks.
Yeah.
The
Just for
latter
my
one-
knowledge, what are the key concerns with UTF-8? What's going to stop that?
So I did this exercise at some point. Levi did it very recently, so maybe he's better to describe it. But we both ran into the same same issues. Basically, I tried to do it in the past, and I'm like, oh, geez, like this is like the example of the stream hacks with async, sync,
Yeah.
various models. You end up basically not knowing which virtual method abstract calls which one. You having many abstract methods. Some are called in this mode, some are in this one. So
It's hard to write the type in such a manner that it perfectly preserves compatibility with all the various things that people may have overridden.
Sure, but that's the case for versioning anything with virtual methods
Yeah.
or abstract methods.
Yeah, it's basically, I think the fundamental problem is if you add new concepts into your virtual patterns, right, then it's like, it's not clear where to add them.
Right. If we were just adding this, if we were just adding a bunch of virtuals, or let me back up, if we were just adding a bunch of abstract methods, first off, that would be a breaking change already, but we
Right.
could make sure that our derived types always did the right thing, right?
Right.
But because we have to give those abstract methods default implementations, that's where things get a bit crazy.
Yeah. Like, again, like I think that's what I would like to see, an incremental thing, and like to Christoph's point of like if we end up having to duplicate all types, well then that's a different problem.
So another thing that I did consider when I did my part of the exercise, so this one has like a nice object-oriented set of APIs. What if for UTF-8 we just add a bunch of static methods to this type called HtmlEncode UTF-8, and basically there are two static methods that do the encoding, and then you have to call them yourself in a loop to do the operation status thingy and
Well,
so
so
on.
there is an operation status API being proposed here. I guess instead of that being a static method, it would have been encoder.default.whatever. If we made it truly static, it would be very difficult to customize the behavior. But,
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like
Yeah.
I did kind of same exercise as you, which is, hey, let's try to like do UTF-8 in the same model. But I'm saying maybe we can just have very low-level APIs that are static APIs, transcode, basically encode from one UTF-8 buffer to another UTF-8 buffer, and then on top of it we write, either helpers or the code like ASP.NET or our code just uses the statics.
We have had cases in the past where people have had to change encoders. People have had to change the implementation of the encoder in order to fulfill their own business requirements. If we made everything static, we wouldn't be able to do that anymore. That is one of the benefits to this being virtual on an abstract type. But sure.
Yeah, we either can punt on the requirement, or if you feel that the requirement is, we need to support it, then maybe do like some overload with a callback.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll call this callback on every thread. I mean, on every chunk. And
I mean, that seems like that would take performance even worse, to be honest. But sure.
I mean,
okay. If we were to, instead of burning this type down, like, would it make sense to bring up a parallel type which kind of replaces it but without touching this type at all?
I think that if we basically say we cannot have a static, and adding it in place is basically completely butchering this type, then sure, we just basically have, as Imo was saying, UTF-8 HtmlEncoder.
Okay.
Or are you saying we would add a parallel type that subsumes this one?
That subsumes this as well.
Yeah, that one I'm not, I don't know. I don't think it's worth it, but you feel strongly about this hierarchy and I don't, so.
I mean, if there's a type that can do UTF whatever and, or it can do all the UTF whatevers, then that seems.
So I'm very skeptical of a type. So basically, one of the additional difficulties that I remember is, so you initialize the text writer to write, in some encoding. You can pass encoding to the writer. When you have a method on this type that can do either UTF-16 or UTF-8, depending which one you call, you get weird performance. Basically, there are also performance characteristics. Like, performance is not very transparent if you add UTF-8 directly to this type. So that, I actually think that it's, frankly, not doable.
That's fair.
Without some words.
No. So I'm like, if a new type comes up and it can do, instead of specializing it to UTF-8, if a new type can come up and it can reasonably do Rune as UTF-32, it can reasonably do char as UTF-16 LE, and it can reasonably do whatever UTF-8 string looks like, then I think that would be reasonable, and it's just if it can't do it reasonably, then specializing in UTF-8 seems fine.
Yeah, okay. Sure. I can rework this proposal then.
Because as it is, it's, that we have to tell people, use this one if you have char, use this one if you have UTF-8, and figure out which one is less painful to call if you're working with Rune.
But the alternative, as I was saying, you have one type, and then you tell people, if you're in UTF-16 mode, then call these methods. Don't call these others, because it's going to be super, super slow. And if you're in UTF-8 mode, there's some other set of methods.
Presumably, the type that you're using to represent all of this data would just naturally make you call them out sufficient overloads. We are still broadcasting right now, by the way.
All right, so then
Do you want to be on
You
TV?
guys about done.
Yeah, we are done.
Yeah.
All right. I think
guys.
that's it for today.